Hey, everybody. Thank you so much for tuning in to today's episode of Startups Unedited. Today, I'm joined by an awesome CEO and founder, entrepreneur. Aaron, we're going to dive into some of your background here in a second, but I'm going to pull up your LinkedIn and go through this thing because not only have you worked at some really awesome brands in B2B SaaS, but you've carried a bag, you've operated teams, like some of the companies out there that folks might know, Greenhouse, right? So really, really popular. You were there a little over 3 years, and it looks like you've operated like sales development teams, top of the funnel, sales teams, the AEs carrying bags, and then you've also done a lot of sales enablement. And one of the things that I wanted to point out is like you're an angel investor in a couple really cool companies, Champify, Atrium. Shout out to that team there, and now you're working on Itero. First of all, how are you? You're tuning in from Silicon Valley or San Francisco, although some folks would say that San Francisco is not technically Silicon Valley, but I think I'm going to say that it is these days.
Yeah. I'm doing great. I'm a happy guy. I have a lot of things to be grateful for. Yeah, just happy to be here.
Awesome. Now, real quick, let's dive into kind of this founder journey, right? Because you are my favorite founder kind of type or profile. Like you are a sales person who, again, carried bag, operated teams. You know enablement. You've held those roles. You worked at sales tech companies, etc. Who's now transitioned into being a CEO. Let's talk a little bit about that. Like, tell me about that moment where you were sitting there. You're like, you know what? I need to go and start a company, and I am now going to have to become a CEO, which is a little different, right, than carrying a bag or operating a team at someone else's company.
Yeah. To directly answer your question, the exact moment I decided I wanted to be a founder was, uh, I'd been basically ChatGPT exploded onto the marketplace, and my mind expanded, more or less. I think that really is the short answer to that question. And I just remember sitting here thinking, oh my gosh, I don't exactly know how or what this is going to, or how this is going to be commercially viable, but I know that there's certainly going to be a lot of applications for it. And at the time, I was an enterprise rep at Orem. Orem is a power dialer. So the way you successfully sell Orem is we would do a pilot, and during those pilots, the reps had to book meetings. So in order to book meetings, the reps had to be well trained, and they had to have the basics of cold calling down. And so I very early on connected enablement to actual sales success for me as a rep. And I would be literally teaching people, like, what's your opener, and permission-based openers, and how are you going to respond to the I'm busy objection. And I would get everyone to write down, okay, what are the top 10 objections? And they're all the same. Every company would perceive that all their objections they got were super different, but really at the end of the day, they're actually all the same for the most part. And so I would get everyone to write their most common objections down. And then, okay, then what are you going to say when you get that objection? And then as I would train them, I would literally role play with them over and over and over again. I'm like, okay, let's practice your opener. Okay, now say it 5 more times and 5 more times. And so once I started experimenting with ChatGPT, I was like, oh, I get it. I can have a bot do this, and it scales much more nicely than actually like human to human role play. So that was really that was kind of the moment. And I'm very passionate about helping people. A lot of people have helped me along the way, and so I had a lot of fun helping early reps become successful over the phone. And so I thought that hey, this is a great way to help people at scale. Yeah.
How long have you been on this journey now building Itero?
Yeah, so I've been full time on Itero since basically August of 2024.
Wow. Okay. So you've been in the trenches. What was like that first couple months like? Because all of us who have been part of these experiences as an entrepreneur founder, like there's some very interesting moments, right? Especially early on, especially pre revenue. I know you're post revenue now. You've done this pretty much all by yourself as a single founder, which is it's another, that's another journey.
That's a whole nother conversation. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So the first few months were very difficult because I obviously don't have a technical background. And, you read from a lot of other VCs, we just don't invest in people people who don't have technical backgrounds. And I definitely understand why, because the thing that I was doing is a deeply technical thing. There's so many options out there. And certainly in August 2024, the dust had not settled at all. I think the dust I'm not going to call it settled, but there are actually established protocols for a lot of things that you're doing. And I didn't have any sort of knowledge about any of it. So I really had to learn it all on my own. And it was just constant research, constant unknown. Am I doing things right? I don't know. Never being sure about pretty much anything. And at a certain point, you just got to get out there and start making some bets. And that's what I started doing. So product wise, it was definitely very scary, I would say. Certainly initially. Now I feel much more comfortable. I have established processes for developing product requirements. I have a team that I work with that also can give me feedback. It's less lonely now, for sure. And I've also learned from some mistakes. And so, there are like some patterns are making themselves appear. And I can follow those patterns. And whereas, on the go-to-market stuff, it was very like obvious what I had to do: build lists, cold call people, book meetings, do a demo, do a pilot, close the deal, and rinse and repeat. And now I actually, I manage accounts too, which has actually been really a rewarding part of the job. But from a product perspective, that was a challenge. That was definitely a challenge, but got to do it. Have to learn.
So would you say that like the actual product development and building was the most challenging thing, and it sounds like you're actually like building product right now?
So I am definitely I'm not actually I'm not building product for Itero. I certainly do a lot of product design and a lot of I basically have agents to help me with product design, whether or not that's, I never just start from a conversation. I start with a human. I'm always getting mocks drawn up with AI initially, describing my requirements. And then, I have a product requirements document agent that then distills all of this down into little bits and pieces. Then I give it to the designers. Then I give it to the engineers. Now we have a process for how to work through all that stuff. Whereas before you just kind of hit or miss. And you really, I definitely have a bias to put a process in place around things. So, and I would say Perplexity was an app that really changed things for me. It's one thing to chat with a ChatGPT, but I want things grounded in truth. And Perplexity was really a huge unlock for me because I knew that the answers were grounded in what actual developers were doing. So I could ask, like what is this RAG approach versus this RAG approach, and actually see what people are talking about. And then if I didn't know the answer to a question, I could ask about what is that in a non-judgmental environment. And so that was just a steep learning curve. And at this point, am I building product for Itero? No, but I am writing code. I use anti-gravity, and I build workflows for myself. I basically generate proposals automatically, automatically grabs a transcript, automatically grabs, does company research. So from that perspective, I'm more of an agent manager, maybe not, I wouldn't call myself a developer. I'm doing everything. Everything.
Well, it sounds to me that this is like, we've been hearing about this future that's more of the present state for you, where you're leveraging agents. And I know we're doing some webinars and stuff like that, teaching folks how to build agents for their go-to-market efforts. But it looks like I'm sitting here listening to you, and you're talking about agents like it's like standard stuff, right? And this is really something that's popped up in recent years, right? Like
Well, I would say only the last 6 months actually have even where the capabilities are actually
like viable,
true autonomy.
Yeah.
Like for instance, I have a previous business that I built when I was like 25, long time ago. And I would always have to do the books for that every quarter, basically. And like, I truly have automated that entire process where it's airtight and completely automated. And so, that's a lot of time savings for me. And that was kind of a test run for me. Can I actually get an agent to do actual work and autonomously make decisions and so forth? And the answer is yes. And it was one of the most empowering things I've ever experienced. My next project, then I built an agent to build proposals for Itero, and now I want to build a bookkeeper for Itero. I don't think I'm going to have to hire any sort of finance team. All of the information's out there, and all of the information is out there. It's just a matter of retrieving it and organizing and creating the right context, and then your agents can do the work for you.
So you are like a live case study that has already accomplished a lot of what we've been dreaming about and a lot of people have been talking about, but most people, in my experience, don't actually know how to operationalize, right? And the key word there is operationalize these agents, like to work together to actually operate a business. Like I'm seeing a lot of folks like, oh, they'll build a little agent here in the corner and then someone else is building something here. But it's an organization, right? We have to like work together and be unified. And it sounds like you are the prototype or case study for that scenario where you are this single founder that's building out all these functions using agents. And we don't have to keep backing into this old model, which is, I got to now like hire the bookkeeper you mentioned, right? Like that is a human, or whether it's either internally, let's say some kind of finance oriented person that had to take that on, who hates it. By the way, I've never met anyone who loves that work, that kind of work, especially if you're not like focused on bookkeeping, right? Or you outsource it to a firm, right? You're actually saying, you know what, like that boring stuff, that repetitive stuff, that's all possible. And I'm now doing that. The other thing that I heard here for the folks listening, like this is super, super interesting. Definitely follow Aaron on LinkedIn and, maybe follow his content or ping him, I know you're super busy, but this is really, really interesting because the other thing I heard is like, you're a salesperson. I'm looking at your background, right? Like you and I have been, in communication, doing a variety of different things over the last, month or two or whatnot. Like, I know that you're first and foremost a business-minded salesperson, but I can't help but think like, dude, I'm hearing a little bit of product manager here in you, right? And you're able to do this. For the folks out there, Aaron's able to do this because of this new agentic world.
Yeah, it's a combination of a couple things there. So the first thing, I was very lucky to work at Greenhouse. I worked there for almost 4 years. John Strauss, co-founder and really primary product manager. I just learned a lot from him, how he thought about product and how he managed his team. Very like his the way his mind worked, at the time when I started working with John, I was 29 or something. So I was, he was much later in his career. So yeah, I wasn't really good at anything really at 29, just worked, just hustled. That's at 29. But I learned a lot from him and how he managed the greenhouse product. And the greenhouse product is an awesome product. And Alex Powell, who started off as a support agent at Greenhouse and became this awesome, incredible product manager. And so I remember learning from those guys. My next role after Greenhouse was at a company called Heap, which is a product analytics company. Yeah. And so I continued to learn product management principles from people working at Heap. And that helps. Yeah, that definitely helps. And I think the difficult thing about Itero was that I was building something that has never been built before. So a lot of the design practices and principles didn't necessarily apply. And then there's always the problem of like what the users say they want and what they actually want. And you've kind of got to walk a fine line. So one of the things that I feel like I've been pretty good at is always being super in touch with my customers and just trying to solve their problem at the end of the day. Like that's what you have to do as a salesperson. Can you match your solution to their problem in a unique way? And so and then I use my product a lot myself. And so if I'm ever doing something and I run into a roadblock, I would try to solve that problem. And so that's a lot of the features are just around like removing friction, creating scenarios. Like anyone can create a role play in ChatGPT, but scaling a behavior across your entire organization is actually the hard part. And then there's definitely some massaging you have to do to get the right behaviors out of bots. But there's really about like, how do you, like when you say, okay, let's create a role play. And it's like, well, what are we going to do? What's going to be in this role play? Well, you got to know the persona and the behaviors. But then if you just have to type that all in yourself, that's actually quite difficult. So you actually have to give your customers a whole bunch of tools so that they can brainstorm about what they should actually be building. And so that process of using your own product and just constantly just trying to ship features that solve immediate problems while keeping the bloat
low.
Like exactly.
Yeah.
So I'm very, very sensitive to that. Sometimes I might be doing that, but then on the other hand, the cost of shipping features now is lower because we have AI code generation tools. So maybe we should actually be stepping away from some of the older product management principles where just ship it. And, if you can, that kind of employ the Jeff Bezos principle, which is, what's the cost of undoing it? If you can undo it pretty easily, then maybe you should just ship it. So yeah, but definitely a lot of product management, that's for sure. And I think the biggest part of that is that building an AI role play solution is there are not a lot of templates for what that should be. So that was hard.
Speaking of undoing something, are there any sort of things or habits or predispositions that you had to unlearn from your days being a salesperson to now be this founder CEO who has to guide the product roadmap and these sort of things, right? And I say this with a little sort of backdrop in that as a salesperson, like my predisposition is I want to give everything to my customer, right? To my prospect, right? I want to throw in the kitchen sink. I want to over deliver, all that stuff, right? And at the same time, I need to operate an actual organization that's, multifaceted and is building product and has to build and prioritize roadmap and these sort of things. So that's why I ask, is there anything you had to, maybe I probed at it a little bit there in my question.
For sure. You led the witness. Yeah. I think the answer is yes. But on the other hand, like keep in mind that I bootstrap this. So it's my money on the line. And so I want to make sure I'm doing it right. And so that creates a discipline almost immediately about, is this really going to solve her problem? I have John Strauss's voice in my head is like, are we solving the actual problem for the customer? And so you just do more discovery, which is essentially the same thing as that you're doing as an AE anyways. Like, why do you want it like that? Can you explain what you're trying to do? Am I understanding you correctly? What if we tried this? It's just, and I understand enough about the architecture of my platform now where I know if like that's easy and that's hard. But you'll never see me just say yes out of the gate to anything. I more just have a curiosity about what exactly you need there. And I think the customers, for the most part, have the right instincts, right? These are people very just coming to the thing, and they're just trying to get a specific thing done. If they fail to do that is a very good signal about that your product is failing or not delivering and whatever it needs to deliver in.
Yeah.
But the discipline of bootstrapping, right, I think imposes a little bit of a.
It does.
Well, it just makes me think twice about everything. I literally can't say yes to everything.
Yeah.
There's a limited world of resources, and time is actually the primary limiting factor. I could add more bodies into it. The question is what is the cost of ramping up a new engineer, and what is the cost of adding? There's so many considerations here, and I think this is why oftentimes you see VC-backed companies and they just throw a bunch of money at it. And I've been in that environment many times, and there are obviously clearly there are patterns of success there, without a doubt. I think just in this next phase of software entrepreneurship, because we can build things so much faster, that maybe we should just think a little bit differently about how we approach all of that stuff, about how we approach the features that we say yes to. Maybe we say yes more or less. Maybe we should, and just scrutinize the things that we build.
Yeah, I love that perspective. I've never actually heard that perspective, right? Because I think so many of us have been burned by over delivering certain features that, to one of the things you said earlier, that maybe a customer or prospect thinks they want, but do they really want it? And this is one of the phenomenons of some of the stuff that I've experienced as an entrepreneur here as of late, right? Which is, you do a bunch of customer discovery, right? In some cases, it's a weird dynamic because you don't want to lead the witness, right? But at the same time, you're like, you're like, man, this pain point exists because I see it, because I've felt it, because it's obvious in front of me. And I, in some cases, like if you've been around business long enough, you've seen it, several times, right? Across countless companies and organizations. So then you sit there, you go down that path, but then when it comes down to the nitty gritty, which is adopting the product, well, first of all, purchasing it, right? Let's just say, right? Purchasing it, literally putting your money where your mouth is as a whether you're a champion who's now going to go and like find power decision makers to join the conversation, or even just like you've purchased something, maybe there's like a kind of a freemium model or some low entry point plan, and then it's really about adoption, right? Like really saying, you know what, we're going to go through all the change management stuff, or maybe if there's not that much change management, you still have to do the adoption, right? Especially for SaaS tools like we build, that's where it really, like, the rubber meets the road, right? And so, that's where I think it's trickier. I used to think customer discovery was was easy because it was like, yeah, I love talking to people. I understand this space well. I really can visualize the product and, if again, know kind of the problem set that we're going after. And so in some cases there's that leading of the witness that we've both referred to a little bit here. But how do you know, in a world where, whether you're venture backed or not, right, how do you know that, like, of the 100 things you can do, and maybe you're willing to just like ship a little more to that point that you made than maybe you would have pre co-creation tools, LLM based stuff? Still, you still have to, like, only a certain number of hours in the day as a single founder, or even maybe you have a team. There's still like so many possibilities. So yeah, how do you make that decision, right, in a world of limited resources, time, and attention, right? We're still humans, whether we're operating the AI agent or not. We still have to, like, think about input, think it through, co-create with this AI agent. And although you might have, a variety of different options or possibilities out there, you can't do everything, right? So maybe it's, using that analogy that you used earlier, which is like, oh, okay, well, maybe in the past I would have only shipped 5 specific things because the cost of undoing was, of building and undoing, was too great. Maybe it's mitigated a little bit with these new tools, but I still need to be somewhat disciplined.
Yeah. So I mean, I think that always the thing that's in the front of my mind is going to help me advance some sort of deal. And is this feature going to solve a serious problem for someone? I think those are the two North Star questions that I'm asking. Okay. I guess, am I going to be able to close a deal because of this feature? And then does this feature increase the either user engagement? Am I getting more usage out of the product? Or am I solving a problem for my managers, the managers that use my product, which is, are their reps actually getting better? Can a rep have a better experience? Can we just increase the joy of using the product? Is it touching one of those things? And oftentimes though, like, they conflict with each other, right? Sometimes like, yeah, the user's going to love it, but like nobody's going to buy because of it. Yeah. Right. So those are constantly the questions that are going on in my head. The answers are never obvious. And that's why this is, sometimes I guess they're more obvious than others. And you just got to get out there and make some bets. Right. That's why entrepreneurship is scary and risky. And that's why people raise money, because they'd much rather gamble with other people's money.
Yeah.
That is like 100% one of the most difficult things about this job. But I do, I get up really early now. I used to be like a 7:30 type of guy, or 7:15, but I get up at 5:45 now. And I meet with my developers, we talk, and all of the product stuff for me is like morning activity. And so it doesn't feel like it interferes with the commercial part of my job. And yeah, you just gotta be like careful about how you manage your time, and all of that stuff, because, I could spend all day just thinking about product. I really could, but I also have to sell. And then the thing I'm working on right now is being a marketer. I'm not a great marketer. I've never been a great marketer. And that's the thing that I'm learning right now. And I think, like, in what sucks for me is that this next phase of software entrepreneurship is really much bigger. Obviously there are sales-led motions, but I think the content game is more important than ever. So it's, it's just a skill that I'm developing, along with product management skills and all of that stuff. But I think the most valuable skill that I've learned by far is how to build actually autonomous agents. It's like one of the most empowering things I've ever experienced, is that I can spend the time on stuff. It used to be that you had to hire people, or you just didn't hire people and did a really bad job at it or something like that, right? That doesn't have to be the case anymore. I don't have to prospect. I have a AI auto prospector that I built for myself that works exactly how I wanted to build. Probably could be productized. There's just enough GTM bloat out there already, but those types of intelligent uses of AI actually help me to learn new skills, think about the product, make good decisions. Of course, I could be doing better, though. I mean, I have no doubt about that. And I don't want, I really miss working with a large team. I miss that very much. And I think COVID changed a lot of that for me. I started working, we were just forced to do that. Then I worked at Orem as an entirely remote company. So, it's been a while. And then I started my own founder journey, right? So it's really, it's been a while since I've worked on a big team. It's not like that I think that that a company should be this one-man show. And by no means is it a one-man show. I have designers, developers, and thought partners in general. With that said, though, all the go-to-market stuff really is me. And then all of the product design. Yeah, I do all of it, but I'm closest to the customer. I am the account manager. I work with them every day. I see what they're having problems with. I'm talking to new customers, existing customers. So that's a lot of data that I'm getting about what the market needs and wants.
About the reality, the front lines.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's one of the things I love about you and your approach and your background, is that for so long, and when I was in Silicon Valley for many years, I would run into more product or technical oriented founders who were like great visionaries. They were great at raising money and great at building product. But when you start to ask them some of the questions around, like, in my opinion, the foundational stuff that they needed to know around sales, they would have no clue, or they'd give you some high level thing that was like, you obviously knew that they didn't get it, right? And then there was this notion that you could just like hire a salesperson to do all that dirty work, right? Quote unquote dirty work. And the fact of the matter is, like, I stand behind this 1,000%. Like, you need to sell. If you're a B2B founder, right? I think consumer, I don't pretend to know a lot about consumer and how to build those kinds of businesses. But I think as a B2B founder, if you're not selling the first, set of revenue, right? Like meaningful revenue, getting some deals done that can give you a repeatable pattern. I'm not even saying that you have to like reach some like significant product market fit going on. Like, I think I'm saying that you need to be able to understand those patterns, right? To be able to then hire the right person, onboard them, those sort of things. It's like working for a sales manager, as a sales rep that has no clue about, what it takes to actually sell. Not only is that setting up the new sales rep, or that first, founding AE, founding closer, right? That's probably working full cycle. In fact, I would argue that you should work full cycle as an early employee or first salesperson. But so it's not only setting them up for not the best experience, potentially failure, but you as a leader too. Like, if you don't know what that looks like, you can't actually hold people accountable. It's one of the things that, it's like in professional sports. Steve Kerr, I'm sure you're a Warriors fan out there, maybe. But I think one of the great things about Steve Kerr is that,
great leader. He's such a
great leader. But he can also sit there and be like, dude, I've been there. I've done that. This is how it works, right? Like, And I'm not saying that you have to be that all the time, right? You can get around it in other ways, like Eric Spoelstra, right? I'm a Heat fan. You might see my shirt. He didn't play in the NBA, right? But he did play in college, I believe, and
Yeah.
spent a lot of time, whatever. And he's arguably one of the best coaches as well. But so there are some exceptions to that. I'm not saying, but I think that they're very few and far between, and you have to have walked the walk, right? Like I don't know any coach that didn't actually play the game, right? Right. And so my point is that you don't have to have been a salesperson or sales leader, et cetera. But when you enter the role of a CEO, founder, whatever title you want to give yourself, right? You have to carry the bag in a B2B venture, period. You have to be able to have some data to hand over. And I just don't know, again, how, or I don't want to say I don't know how you can win around that, because I could definitely think creatively around it and have seen, kind of versions of it, but it definitely takes a little longer. And I think the chances of succeeding are much lower when you haven't carried the bag. Now, you hear it all the time. I'm sure you've seen this. You get that founder who's hired the first sales leader, sales rep, and how many times do they get fired, right? And they're churning through them and they're learning the hard way. And it's like, hey, we should have just done this as a unified thing. I should have done some of the early deals, transferred over what I learned, and then we build together. So I just wanted to say that I think this new world with the agentic stuff really allows for a lot of different possibilities. But even then, for you folks out there, again, you have to, I think, follow this model that Aaron is talking about. Aaron, real quick before we wrap up, what advice would you give folks out there who are thinking about becoming a founder, and maybe they've never done it before? Maybe they're salespeople like you who are now looking to transition to being a founder CEO. What advice would you give them around preparing for this founder journey? I love the deep sigh or deep breath there.
Yeah. What is the advice? My advice is you definitely you have to be ready for or comfortable with unknowns, I think. And so if you're unable to be comfortable in that environment, you're probably not ready yet. And so there's a lot of ways to figure that out about yourself. But ultimately, I think you've got to be just comfortable with the unknowns, and you got to love what you do. I love working with my customers, and when I get up in the morning, I'm excited to work on something and ship something new and unlock some sort of new process and to clear the way for go-to-market activity is really kind of how I think about it. And I was listening to Andreessen or Mark Andreessen, and he was actually talking about, and this is 3 days ago, and he was talking about founders that have this kind of like very horizontal skill set, like are pretty good at a lot of different things. And so I would, if you're a more of a, go-to-market founder, I would definitely be playing around with writing your own code with AI agents. I love anti-gravity. It teaches you about development, and it gives you an idea of like what's difficult and what's not difficult. And I think that's a super important thing. I don't think that agents can do everything for you, but they can definitely do a lot. And if you are not trying to master that world, you are definitely putting yourself at a disadvantage. You're just going to make yourself. There are other people who are, first of all, but I think that it's just an important skill set that you have to have. And if you're a tech founder, if you're have more of a technical background, you should be learning go-to-market stuff. It's super important. I've seen, I think she's the CEO of, it's called Recall. They have an API to record meetings. HubSpot uses them.
Mm-hmm.
She's totally a technical founder, but she is all over LinkedIn. She's doing an incredible job of marketing, and she's 10,000 times better at than I am. And she's a technical founder for sure. So I think you've got to be horizontal. That's the point. And you've got to intelligently use AI to either acquire the skill or teach you about it, or do it yourself, or a little bit of all of the above. So yeah, go horizontal, and just make sure that you're ready for uncertainty and that you're comfortable with it, and have fun. You gotta have fun with it. That's the most important thing. If you're not having fun, people do their best work when they're having fun. That's just the fact that I see over and over. So that's my advice.
Awesome. Well, thank you for that wisdom. For the folks out there, thank you so much for joining us. If you're watching this on YouTube, go ahead and click on subscribe, comment, let us know what questions you have. Did you like the insight here? What would you like us to cover? Also follow us on your favorite podcast platform, Spotify or Apple, or you also might be watching a clip of this on LinkedIn. If you are, go ahead and follow Aaron. He says he's not great at content. I don't know. I call BS. I love your content. It's great. And I think there's a lot of insight there. Also, go ahead and follow me on LinkedIn here if you're not doing so, if you love the content. And Aaron, real quick, would you say that LinkedIn is the best channel to reach you?
Yeah, it's super easy to reach me there. Constantly monitoring it. So yeah, it's a great place to reach me.
Awesome. Well, have a great day.
Awesome. Thanks, man. Take care, Jorge.